Three words can destroy a prince's future. Three words that weren't shouted across palace halls or whispered in royal corridors, but delivered in the calculated silence of an English country estate. Prince Harry thought he understood the game. He thought the battle lines were drawn between him and his brother William, fighting over crowns and titles and the future of the monarchy. He was completely blind to the real threat. The woman who built her reputation on silence has finally spoken, and her verdict is absolute. While tabloids obsessed over brotherly feuds and Meghan's latest appearance, something far more devastating was happening behind closed doors. Princess Anne, the royal family's most feared operative, has executed what insiders are calling an inheritance assassination. Harry's last financial fortress, the millions he believed were untouchable because they came from his mother, not the crown, is now frozen solid. He spent years building his California empire on one assumption. No matter how badly things went with the royals, Diana's money was his birthright. That assumption just shattered. Here's what Harry missed. Buried in the legal architecture of his mother's estate is a clause that turns inheritance from a right into a privilege that can be revoked. Princess Anne found it, understood its power, and is now wielding it like a legal sword. She's arguing something that could redefine how royal money works forever. That by turning family secrets into Netflix content, Harry didn't just betray his relatives, he violated a binding contract with the dead. Stay with me, because what's coming next reveals the hidden mechanism Anne is using to lock the vault. We're going to expose the legal loophole that reclassifies jewelry as crown property, and we're going to explain the California scenario that has the palace in absolute panic. The money Harry counted on to secure his children's future might never reach American soil. The inheritance was supposed to arrive on his birthday. Instead, he got a rejection letter from the one aunt he never saw coming. Understanding why Princess Anne took this nuclear option requires understanding something most people get wrong about royal inheritance. It's not a trust fund you access with a debit card. It's a labyrinth of legal entities, each with its own rules, its own guardians, and its own definitions of who deserves what. For years, Harry operated with a simple mental model. He knew that leaving the royal family meant losing access to the sovereign grant, the taxpayer money that funds working royals. He understood that William's future wealth from the Duchy of Cornwall was forever out of reach. But the Spencer money, the inheritance from his mother's aristocratic family, that was supposed to be different. That was supposed to be unconditional, a safety net woven from his identity as Diana's son, not his role as a prince. Princess Anne is now systematically dismantling that assumption. Her intervention at what's being called the Gatcombe Summit has introduced a concept that's sending shockwaves through both the royal family and Harry's legal team. She's identified what estate lawyers call hybrid assets. These aren't straightforward inheritances like cash in a bank account. They're items that exist in a legal gray zone, and that ambiguity is exactly what Anne is exploiting. Let's talk about what's actually at stake. Part of Diana's estate includes jewelry, extraordinary pieces that Harry views as deeply personal connections to his mother. Some of these items are things Diana wore in iconic photographs, pieces with emotional weight that transcends their monetary value. Harry sees them as heirlooms, irreplaceable links to the woman who shaped his understanding of compassion and vulnerability. But Anne's legal team is viewing them through an entirely different lens. They're arguing that many of these jewels were never truly Diana's private property. They were permanent loans from the Queen's personal collection, or they were gifts specifically tied to Diana's position as Princess of Wales. The logic Anne is presenting is ruthlessly simple. These items weren't given to Diana as a private citizen. They were given to the Princess of Wales, a role that comes with responsibilities and expectations. When Diana died, the items didn't automatically become the private property of her sons. They remained connected to the institution that created the role in the first place. Anne's argument cuts to the bone. You cannot claim the privileges of a position after you've publicly resigned from it and spent years attacking the institution that gave you that position. By stepping away from royal duties and then monetizing his insider access, Harry has, in Anne's view, severed any claim to assets that were tied to royal status. But this fight isn't really about diamonds and sapphires. The most dangerous items in this hybrid category are things the public has never seen. Audio recordings of Diana's voice, private tapes where she spoke freely about her life, her fears, her understanding of the royal machine. Letters written in her own hand, documents that contain unfiltered thoughts, never meant for public consumption. These materials are, to Harry, validation. They prove he understands his mother's true feelings about the institution. They legitimize his role as the keeper of her authentic legacy. Princess Anne looks at these same items and sees something completely different. She sees ammunition for a media company. She's watched how Harry and Meghan transformed private family moments into a Netflix documentary series. She witnessed how Harry's memoir turned confidential conversations into best-selling chapters. Now, the scenario that keeps Anne and the rest of the family awake at night is frighteningly specific. They envision Diana's private jewelry appearing on a red carpet in Los Angeles, worn to promote a streaming deal or a lifestyle brand launch. They imagine those sacred audio tapes edited into a documentary, Diana's voice used as a marketing tool, her most vulnerable moments turned into content. Anne's position is that the vault holding these items isn't a bank, it's a shrine. It exists to protect Diana's memory from commercialization, not to fund her son's Hollywood ambitions. By attempting to reclassify these hybrid assets as crown-adjacent property rather than personal inheritance, Anne isn't just blocking a transaction. She's redefining what it means to be Diana's heir. She's arguing that true inheritance requires stewardship, not just bloodline. And as long as she controls the classification of these assets, they will remain locked in England, thousands of miles from the cameras and contracts of California. But Anne didn't stop with reclassifying jewelry. She found something in the legal foundation of the trust that transforms this from a family disagreement into a legitimate contract dispute, something that could make the blockade permanent and legally unbreakable. While Prince William was reportedly responding to Harry's actions with emotional hurt and personal anger, Princess Anne was responding with something far more dangerous: administrative precision. She understood that moral outrage wouldn't stop money from flowing to California. Feelings don't freeze bank accounts. What freezes bank accounts is finding the right legal mechanism and then activating it with surgical accuracy. Anne and the legal experts she consulted went deep into the archives of the Spencer Trust, searching the original documents that govern how Diana's estate operates. And in that dense legal language, written generations ago by aristocrats who understood how quickly family fortunes could be destroyed by reckless heirs, they found exactly what they needed. It's called a disrepute provision, though some legal documents refer to it as a moral clause. Its existence changes everything, because it transforms this situation from a subjective family argument into an objective breach of contract case. To understand why this matters, you have to understand how old aristocratic money actually functions. These aren't modern bank accounts where you can withdraw funds at will. These are trusts established decades or even centuries ago, built with a very specific philosophy. They weren't designed simply to make descendants wealthy. They were designed to protect the family name across generations, to ensure that the actions of one individual couldn't destroy the reputation that took centuries to build. The disrepute provision gives trustees extraordinary power. It allows them to withhold funds if a beneficiary engages in behavior that brings scandal, dishonor, or public disgrace upon the family. For generations, this clause existed purely in theory. No Spencer had ever truly tested its limits. The family had its share of scandals, certainly, but nothing that rose to the level of sustained public commercial attacks on the family's standing. But Anne is now arguing that the last 4 years have fundamentally changed the equation. Sources close to the process suggest Anne is building what can only be described as a legal dossier, a comprehensive case file documenting every instance where Harry's actions could be classified as bringing disrepute upon the Spencer name. It's methodical, and it's devastating. The dossier reportedly catalogs every critical statement Harry made about the royal family in interviews, every revelation in his memoir that exposed private family dynamics, every paid appearance where he discussed internal family conflicts. Each item is being presented not as free speech or personal expression, but as a separate, documentable breach of the trust's conduct requirements. In Anne's framework, Spare wasn't just a book. It was a signed confession of contract violation. Her legal argument is breathtaking in its ruthlessness. She's claiming that Harry isn't simply a passive beneficiary waiting to receive what's rightfully his. By actively selling access to family secrets, by turning private information into commercial products, Harry has engaged in what lawyers might call hostile economic activity against the very institution that created his inheritance. Think about the logic she's presenting to the trust executors. Why should the estate continue funding someone who is actively working to damage the social standing and public reputation of the bloodline that created the wealth in the first place? She's framing continued payments not as fulfilling a family obligation, but as subsidizing opposition. This legal strategy effectively argues that Harry is not competent to manage the legacy responsibly. It suggests that releasing funds to him would be a violation of the trust's core mission, which is to protect the family's reputation and longevity. If this blockade holds up under legal scrutiny, it creates a terrifying precedent for Harry. It means his safety net isn't a birthright guaranteed by blood. It's a conditional privilege that can be revoked based on behavior. And right now, the most powerful enforcer in the royal family is making a very convincing case that the privilege has been systematically abused. Harry's legal team in California is reportedly in crisis mode because they understand the nightmare they're facing. Fighting a UK-based trust law battle from 5,000 miles away, in a foreign legal system, against opponents with institutional power and generational legal expertise, is almost impossible. But Princess Anne isn't just looking backward at Harry's past actions. She's looking forward, calculating future risks. And the risk that concerns her most is tied directly to the legal system where Harry now lives, a system that could result in Diana's legacy being lost forever. Princess Anne didn't build her reputation on sentimentality. She built it on pragmatism and cold risk assessment. While William might be driven by feelings of betrayal and personal hurt, Anne is driven by something more calculating, worst-case scenario planning. She's looked at the financial reality of Harry and Meghan's life in California, and she's identified what she describes as a structural trap, a situation where money doesn't just get spent, it disappears into an operational black hole with no bottom. To understand Anne's refusal to release funds, you have to look past the glamorous headlines and examine the actual economics of Brand Sussex. The reality is that maintaining their current lifestyle requires a staggering amount of capital. Anne, who famously wears the same outfits for decades and lives well within her means, is reportedly shocked by what financial analysts call their burn rate. This isn't just about mortgage payments, though the $14 million Montecito estate certainly contributes. It's about the cumulative cost of maintaining an operation that functions like a small corporation. There's private air travel, because commercial flights create security concerns and media circuses. There are legal fees for the multiple ongoing lawsuits Harry has filed in London against tabloids, costs that run into the millions annually. There's a full staff of PR professionals, digital strategists, and brand managers required to maintain their public image and manage their various business ventures. But the single largest expense, the one that fundamentally changes the financial equation, is security. Since losing taxpayer-funded police protection, Harry has been forced to pay for a private security detail that operates at a level normally reserved for heads of state. Estimates put this single line item somewhere between $2 and $3 million every year. Princess Anne's calculation is brutally practical. If she releases the Spencer inheritance now, it won't be saved for future generations or carefully invested to create lasting wealth for Archie and Lilibet. It will be absorbed into operational costs within months, used simply to maintain their current lifestyle and keep the business running. In her assessment, sending millions to Montecito isn't honoring Diana's legacy. It's throwing money into a system designed to consume it. Before we explore the most disturbing element of Anne's strategy, I want to pause and connect with all of you watching. These stories about family conflict and financial pressure are universal, even when they're happening in palaces. I genuinely hope you and everyone you care about are safe, healthy, and finding moments of peace today. We're sharing this story with a global audience, and I'm always amazed to see how far these conversations travel. I'd be genuinely honored to know where you're joining us from. Please take a moment to share your city and country in the comments below. Are you watching from London, Sydney, Toronto, or somewhere completely unexpected? Let us know. Your global perspective makes this community special. Now, back to the crisis unfolding. If the burn rate was the only factor, Anne might have simply delayed payments or restructured distributions. But there's a second layer to her strategy, one that's darker and more personal, and it involves Meghan Markle directly. Insiders suggest that part of Anne's urgency comes from a very specific legal fear tied to California's marital property laws. Princess Anne is acutely aware that California operates as a community property state, and that legal designation changes everything about how inheritance is treated.